organizations, groups will all be there. So uh, it's it's going to be great, and I hope you guys can make it. I'm actually in charge of putting the floats into the parade, so I'll be standing right there, putting you guys on the right float, and then making sure you go at the right time.
All
So if
right.
you can make it, that'd be great.
Yeah, we're going to support Marty. He is 25th anniversary. It's a milestone, and we want to be there to help make it a great success. And we'll have some caps. So if you want to participate, let Kiva or Cassandra or Ellen know, and we want to be a part of a wonderful, wonderful celebration. So we're going to get started with this evening's activities. Today is a virtual program which really talks about wisdom. And, we're living in times where there just seems to be so many things going on in the world. And it seems like almost that we have almost lost our way. And so that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. How do we get back on track if we can? How do we help to make a difference in our world by being compassionate and kind, caring? How do we embrace our young people and help them to see the better side of our world and our people? So we have a panel of people who are participating in our conversation this evening. I'm very happy about it. We only have 1 hour to do this, though. So we're going to jump in and get started. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we're going to get started. Our panelist this evening is Harry Campbell. Harry, raise your hand. Mark Bonestall, you just heard from Mark. Reverend William Walker, William, raise your hand. Walter Brown, Walter, raise your hand. And Mark Sharp. Where's Mark? There's
Right here.
Mark. All right. So we're going to get started with this evening's conversation, discussion. We don't talk about wisdom any longer. We talk about sports. We talk about money. We talk about the Jets, the Giants, the Knicks. We talk about a lot of things, right? We even talk about politics, but we hardly talk about wisdom. So I'm going to begin by asking our panelists to define what wisdom means to them. And then you all will have a chance to jump in and help us in this evening's conversation. So, Reverend Walker, when we talk about wisdom, give me your definition of wisdom.
So for me, wisdom is the accumulation of knowledge and experiences in life, and putting that knowledge and experience into perspective in such a way that it will help you guide your life and help you to help others guide their life.
So it's the accumulation of experience, of knowledge, of information,
Hmm.
and applying it to your life.
Yeah.
Right? So wisdom is not just knowledge, right? Is basically an understanding, as you were saying, and
Yeah.
the application of what you've learned.
Yes.
Mark Bonestall, tell me a little bit about what you think wisdom is, and how does it fit in your life?
Well, wisdom for me is, much the same as Reverend Walker said. It's an accumulation of experience, the understanding of a deeper understanding of certain situations that typically would baffle us. Having that wisdom helps us see which ways we can go and be safe moving forward. So the wisdom is something that is we use it to gain insight into the right road to travel, if you will.
Think the right road to travel. I like that. And Mark Sharp, when people say, perhaps there are some young people or people in the community, they say that Mark Sharp is a wise man. What does that mean to you, Mark, when they say that you're a wise man?
Well, they're misinformed. But once I get past that, I'll try to take advantage of it. It sort of adds what they were. It's using that experience, and now having had a chance to think about it a little bit, using that experience and knowledge, it's what you learn from that experience to hopefully make good judgments and then make good decisions. And as applied to the youth, which is such a critical piece of it, how we teach the youth to make better judgments. And obviously we fail many times too, but how we use that experience of a lifetime or whatever period of time to make those good judgments. And if somebody, all kidding aside, was to say that something wise about the way I'd approach something, I would hope that would mean that whatever they're seeing in me and the manner in which I may act is consistent with what I might say, or my actions are consistent with my words rather than just being words.
Thanks, Mark. So Walter Brown, you've heard what Mark and Reverend Walker and Mark and others have said. How do you weigh in on this wisdom thing?
Well, I don't want to repeat some of the words that I've heard from the gentleman before me. Accumulation of knowledge, experience, making good decisions in situations you're put into. But I used to tell the youth that I work with, if you come upon and you're about to enter a dark forest and there are man-eating animals in there, you're not going to walk in there with a pebble. And that just comes from experience and knowledge that, there's certain things you're going to need to do and be prepared for when you enter that forest. So I often use that, that analogy to explain what wisdom could be in that situation.
So we have David Hargett. David is, we're working with David in Poughkeepsie around some of the issues and challenges that city has in terms of just trying to create a healthier city. Do you believe that a part of the challenges so many towns and cities and families face is because the substance of wisdom is missing? For example, we met Friday night with David and a whole bunch of people in Poughkeepsie, just trying to come together and say, how can we strategize and help make Poughkeepsie and Newburgh and Yonkers and Mount Vernon healthier cities? What happened to the substance? Where's that substance in families? What's the missing link in terms of passing wisdom on to the next generation and the next generation? What happened, Bill, over time? It used to be a time when families were intact, communities were intact, and fathers sat down with their children at dinner time and how are you doing in school? Did you make right decisions? We talked about judgment, right? Did you get along with your peers? What happens which brings us to where we are today? Reverend Walker?
Oh, okay. Like you called me Reverend Walker one time, you called me Bill another time. I don't know who I am.
I won't call you late for dinner. I won't call you late for dinner, Bill.
Okay, that's good. And so, Frank, one of the things that I think where we've gone off or we've lost our way is, as you mentioned, there used to be a time when families sat down together and had dinner, and it was a time to have conversation. It was a time to pass on wisdom. It was a time for parents to see where the children were and for children to get an understanding of what their parents expected of them. Now it's more, we seem to be more scattered. Kids come in and they fix their own meal, or they'll get something and throw it in the microwave. And so we don't have that family time, that conversation time. And one of the other things, Frank, that I've noticed is that social media has really taken over. And when we go out, I think I mentioned this before, when we go out to dinner, I make sure that the kids don't have their devices, right? Because we want to have time where we can socialize, where we can talk, and where we can have conversation with one another. And too often, we find them staring into a device, right? And their attention is somewhere else, where we need to try to have grab their attention so that we can guide them into things of life.
Thank you, Reverend Walker. And Harry Campbell, you heard what what Reverend Walker said. Social media has impacted our culture, our way of life, our habits, our behavior, and so we are far different than we were 15, 20 years ago. And so tell us about the impact of social media on families, on communities, how we relate and interact with each other. Where there used to be a time when most of us, Martin, we used to sit around the table with dad and family, we sat together, we talked with each other. We live in different days now, so that information is not being passed on from one generation to the next. Do you think that we'll ever get back to where we used to be, where fathers were present at home and dads checked in on their young people, their kids and grandkids, and they were problem solvers, right? But more than that, fathers were heroes. You think we'll ever get back to that, Harry?
Well, I think the effects of social media, I don't think that's going anywhere. But I think we have to be intentional and push the agenda that these other things are important that everybody's been talking about, and that we build as much time as we can in having those conversations and setting up situations where we have time to talk and we have time to communicate, and we set boundaries as far as how much time or which times it's appropriate to be on social media or using the devices and so on. And I think we have to realize that those forces are there, but we have to be a force as much as we can. And I think it's possible to do that. And the fathers can still be fathers, and the grandparents can still be grandparents, and they just have to push the agenda.
So Mark, I see you nodding your head, and I think what Harry is saying is that our families really don't have the structure that we grew up with. Is not may be somewhat compromised or not there. What do you think about that in terms of social media?
I think we may have to adapt. The structure may be different. I certainly agree. Social media is not going away, but we need to find a way to engage. And I think that's what we're saying. One way or another, we need to find a way to communicate, whether it's sitting over the traditional dinner table or at other times. I mean, I see my grandkids, the four of them, if given their druthers, they would be on a device 24/7, and their parents are working hard to find a balance between what's reasonable and yet not have that go on all the time. But they'll try to have the dinner. Now, it may not just be through dinner, but we have to push it, as was just said. We have to find a way to do that. And I think another component in this day and age is we also have to listen when that conversation does take place, and not just impart, because they're growing up in a world that's very different from the one we grew up in. And I don't know, at least for me, that I fully understand it. And it helps when I listen and understand where they're coming from. And maybe they're more responsive than when I speak. But we have to find a way to engage.
Mhm.
And so, Walter, you heard what Mark stated and Harry stated. Do you think we have to be more intentional in terms of our engagement with our families, our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors, young people on the block? Do you think we have to be present where kids are and where they're not?
In my conversations with youth over the years, and certainly in the last few years with the COVID, many youth tell me that they don't have somebody in their life to show them direction, a good role model to help them on their journey, no one to listen to them. And they turn to the streets, or they turn to some of the other trappings that we know young people get caught up in. So, to me, being involved, like my daughters are involved in sports. I've never had to worry that they were around the so-called wrong peers They were always busy. They always had a purpose. Every morning that they woke up, they had a purpose. And they were engaged with people positive, whether it be their teacher, their coach, they're engaged in church. So I think what Mark said earlier, yes, in being engaged, being connected to something, waking up with a purpose, and having somebody in your life, whether it be a family member or somebody in the village, to help you guide your way through all the trappings that we know our youth fall into sometimes.
So, Mark Bonestall, I saw you and your daughter and her husband and your grandkids. They came to the basketball game, and these opportunities build connectivity with your family, and it strengthens the family and the relationship between you and them. But that seems to be missing. And Reverend Walker talked a little bit about when they went over to the county center. We seem to be disconnected in terms of where we spend our time with our families, our kids, whether it's at a dinner table or at an event, like at the Westchester County Center. How do we get these precious times back? How do we restore some of the stuff that was passed on to us that seems to be missing right now? How do we go get some of these opportunities back where people, grandfathers, fathers, and children and neighbors all, I think about right now, the church I attend, Bethel Baptist, we used to have a vibrant Boy Scout program. Well, the Boy Scout program essentially died because we couldn't find a man to step up and carry on the tradition of the Boy Scout. So how do we maintain those things that work well, and also maintain relationships and connectivity with our families and our children's friends and peers?
Well, I think, Frank, excuse me, I think that, the being able to do things together is an important factor. Reverend was saying that they're not allowed to bring their devices with them when they go out to dinner. We're very much the same. When we go hiking, when we go to a museum, we go different places. We'll go for a walk in the woods. It doesn't have to be something fancy. It can be something very simple, but the communion that you have with your grandchildren or your children is important, and it's focused. And so if it's detached from a lot of the day-to-day craziness that's out there, you have a more, you're able to connect at a different level. And I think that, we're doing it with our own families, but, to take it to the community, you really hit the nail on the head by doing the Knicks. I think that more of those types of engagements is going to help bring some of those folks out and get them connected with us.
Reverend Walker, I see you shaking your head. We're talking about influences, right? Wisdom, people who poured into us, people who helped to shape us who we are. Is there one person that you can recall who passed certain information on to you, whether it was wise sayings or things you should be careful about or things you should shy away from? Can you name a person who helped to shape you in terms of making you the person you are today?
Well, certainly I would have to say the greatest influence in my life was my father, my dad. He was a great man, not a very vocal or a very outgoing man. My parents had me when they were older, right? So my dad really couldn't do a lot of things with me, but he always made sure that those things were available for me, right? So if I needed to go to baseball practice, if I needed to go or I wanted to go bowling, he was a great bowler. He always made things available, right? If I needed a ride, I didn't have to beg him to take me anywhere. He would, always be available to take me to those places. But one of the things that I remember that my father always stressed, and he was one who was about being timely. And he always wanted to be on time. And he always told me that if you're 5 minutes early, you're on time, right? And so, he stressed that, you make a good impression when you get there before you're supposed to be there, and not so good an impression when you get there after you're supposed to be there, or just make it on time. And so that's one of the things that I try to always carry with me. And then, he always stressed to be responsible. One of the sayings he told me, and it kind of it sounds a little strange. He would say, if you want to dance, you got to pay the band. And what he was really saying is, when you want to do what you want to do, there comes responsibility and there comes consequences, right? And so you got to know and understand that when you always need to be responsible for your actions. And I always try to keep that in mind. I just wanted to say one other thing, Frank, when Mark was talking about us engaging with the community and with others. You know that my wife and I have been doing foster care for probably 30 years now. And thank God we're at the end of that. But we had a lot of kids come through our home, probably 30 or 40 kids in our home, and we always try to engage them in something. We when we could, we took kids skiing, we took them to the theater, we took them to the movies. We always engaged them with something, and a lot of times they didn't appreciate it, or it seemed as though they didn't appreciate it, but now they all come back and they all say, how we helped them and what we were able to give onto them. And so even in times when it may seem like you're not getting through to them, continue doing what you're doing. Because even when it seems like they don't hear, they hear.
Thank you, Reverend Walker, for that. Harry Campbell, we're talking about people who help to shape you. Is there a person who passed on information to you, wisdom, and helped to shape you in terms of your identity or your life?
Yeah, there've been a number of people, but I would say the number one person would have to be my father also. And it's like there's still stuff that he would say that is in my head even now, and I've repeated it to others, including my son and other people, many of the things that he said. And he didn't have, he didn't even finish high school, and I once said to my son that, your grandfather knows way more than you do, even though you went to college and this and that and the other, because of how long he's been alive. We're talking about wisdom. He has that, so pay attention to, some of the things he would say. And one thing that I remember that it was sort of a weird saying also is that he would say in different situations that they have the handle and you have the blade. And at the time, I didn't really understand what he was talking about. But if you think about, if you're in a situation where somebody's holding a knife, the handle of a knife, and you're holding the blade of the knife, that's a little tricky situation to get out of. And, a lot of times people are thinking about, just fight and, just use emotion to get out of a situation. But sometimes you actually have to think and use your mind. Like, how are you going to get out of this situation? Sometimes you have to be in a situation where you feel like you didn't win the fight, but you get to walk away and you get to live another day and survive. So that was one that I always remembered.
Well, we're living in times now where people seem like, in terms of problem solving, a lot of those skills are not there. And so, you hit me and I'll hit you. It's like the old Western stuff, the old cowboy days, right? You hit me and I'll hit you back, or you do me and I'll do you, or I'm going to get you before you get me. And that is kind of the world. And I know David, who's up in Peekskill, we're dealing with a community where kids are saying, I'll get you before you get me. And that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we as men, as human beings, we stand up where there is injustice, where there's hurt and harm, where we care about our community. And David, we're going to get back to you shortly. I wanted to go to Walter. So Walter, this is something we don't necessarily hear about a lot. When we think of wisdom, can we think of wisdom in the same breath as common sense? You know, Harry talked about his father didn't have a lot of education. My father went to school he only went to school until 6th grade. He went to the Korean War, but he had a lot of common sense. What does common sense and wisdom mean to you, Walter?
Common sense. I'm a child of the civil rights movement. And unlike the gentleman that preceded me, I grew up without a father. But I did a lot of reading. And when the reading started to connect with some of the events going on, during the 60s, people like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Medgar Evers, Whitney Young, these were men who I felt took risks and stood out. And that's when I began to look at things that I was exposed to and situations I was exposed to where I had to make good decisions. So my wisdom really came from what I was seeing out in society and how I had to carry myself as a young Black man. I had the opportunity to go into the Black Panthers during my militant time. And I got pulled aside by a couple of brothers that were in the Black Panthers here in Westchester. And they told me, Walter, your journey is going to be different because we feel we've been infiltrated. They told me that. You have a different journey. And I made a very good decision not to go that way, but to make my impact with other qualities, other talents that I had. So my common sense was back in 1971, where I had to make a decision to go in a direction that we found out later on wouldn't have been a good one for me. So that's where my common sense sort of came out. And I still wrangle with what might have happened, 50 years ago, had I gone in that other direction and not been able to make the impacts that I have made over the last, 50 years or so. I still struggle with that,
I want to pick up that, Mark. I want to pick up on this common sense thing, and I want to add to that consequences. We live at a time now where in homes throughout the nation, there are hardly any consequences. Can you talk a little bit about common sense, wisdom, and consequences? Did you raise your children with consequences, with rules and regulations and that sort of thing?
This Mark?
Yes.
Me
Yes,
on this one? Yeah.
Yeah. Mark S. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. But I'm listening to what Walter said, and that illustration, I think, says it so well. Wisdom and common sense run hand in hand, but think of what his decision-making process was in terms of his thinking through what the consequences were for either direction he may have gone in. And he chose one as opposed to the other. I see them being intimately related. My wife and I certainly utilized consequences, sometimes very simple ones, but actually my wife was more consistent with it than I ever was. And it was always a term as our kids were growing up, in terms of there are consequences for whatever you do, how simple it is, not doing the homework, not doing it fully, or doing it fully. So I think in terms of our common sense or tying that with wisdom, I don't know if it answers it, but I think they're intimately connected. And teaching the younger generation to put those two together. I think maybe what you were talking about earlier, and I see it too, the difficulty is, I think many times youth is making decisions without considering the consequences. And that's where things can go awry.
Mark, so we are, all of us who are on this platform have experienced a lot. We've been through a lot. We went through the civil rights period, the death of Kennedy, Dr. King, Malcolm X, and so many others. So we've come through a lot of the change that the country has experienced, and we're still going through a lot. Has politics impeded the way we live and changed the narrative for us? When we look at the politics and its impact on our daily living, do you think that the change in our political paradigm has hurt us or helped us? How do you view this in terms of, as a father, as a man? You know, we got people, whether it's the Congress or folk in Albany, or even here in White Plains in the mayor's office. What role did politics, if politics played a role in how you poured into your family? Mark B.
This Mark?
Yes. Mark B.
Sorry, just wanted to clarify. So politics right now is certainly playing a role in our whole society. I can remember the politics when I was younger. The civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement. A lot of people were standing up for what they believed in, and rightfully so, and letting their voice be heard. And it was historical because typically society didn't do that. They just went along with what their predecessors had done. And we started setting precedent. And, unfortunately, I think it's grown to the point where it's not good. Where, in my view, the politics today are not great. I think they've lost sight of what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be helping people, helping manage people, helping people get better at what they are, and they're not. In a lot of cases, it's about themselves and the next office or the next step. And it's more. It's more prevalent in the national news, but you find it everywhere. And so I think that has a large impact on societal views, especially the young juveniles that are watching. We say that there's consequences, and I agree with Mark. I mean, there's always consequences for my kids, but when they see somebody get away with stuff, it's not always equally doled out, is it? So, people do things that are wrong and just terribly wrong, and still have a way of sidestepping consequences. And so that distorts the whole meaning for them. At least when I was growing up, the consequence was, you got what you deserved. If you were, if I was out striking for the anti-war movement and I was arrested, then I got arrested, and I was willing to make the change in society and deal with those consequences. Right now, they seem to only apply to certain levels of our society, and not all the levels of society. So I would tell you that it's changed a lot, and not for the better.
So Harry Campbell, we're talking about the big picture, government, politics, and what role it plays in all of our lives, right? We live in a 24/7 news cycle. The government, the politics, it's almost like they're living in our houses, right? What role does, in terms of your family, your situation, your life, has government impeded the way your family lives and and impacts in terms of how you pass on information to your family?
Well, I think there are good politicians and there's some good examples, but I think there's so many negative examples in the news that it's hard to point to politicians and say, yes, that's a good example of this, that, or the other to reinforce what you're trying to teach in your home. So I think I encourage being a participant in the political action and voting and all those things. But in terms of looking at somebody as an example of how you should be, how you should act, how you should deal with problems, how you should communicate, I don't point to them because they're usually doing a pretty bad job of it. And I think in most cases, in many cases, children, except that they wouldn't understand some of the complexities of some of the issues, children would do a better job of talking out the issue and deciding what direction things should go in, because so much of it doesn't make sense. And to try to explain to a child even why they're doing things the way they're doing it and how come they're fighting so much, it's a tough thing to do. But I think we still have to deal with government, obviously, and it affects our lives directly in terms of even programs that we're involved with funding and all those kinds of things. So we need them, but it does make it difficult the way that the impression that you get from them as far as how they communicate and deal with problems and run things.
Walter, I was just looking at this topic and was reading that the highest form of wisdom is kindness. So this follows up on what we were talking about, government and politics. When I was growing up, and I'm assuming when you guys were growing up, we had this thing called being a neighbor, right? Kindness, wisdom, helping others, right? Serving, caring. Tell me about your perspective with kindness, and because nowadays it seems like kindness is in our rearview mirror. Any thoughts about kindness and wisdom and that sort of thing?
It's definitely lacking. um, you know, just some of the simple things when I was growing up, giving your seat to an elder, walking an elder across the street, um, welcoming a neighbor into the neighborhood that's just moved in, with a cake or something. All these little things of kindness have seemed to go away. And even this morning, I'm on the bus, and a man was struggling to get off the bus. He had a cane, and no one made an effort to get up and help him off the bus. I got up, but when I went to touch his arm, he jumped because I think he wasn't even accustomed to somebody maybe even trying to help out. So I almost felt like it became like I was going to accost him as opposed to help him. But I'm very disenchanted with just the lack of kindness in our society, and our children are seeing it. And I'm going to go back to what someone said earlier. Our politicians, my daughters say they lack ethics and morals. And this upcoming election, they're not sure who they're going to vote for. They're going to be one of these uncommitted because they said they can't seem to feel positive about voting for anybody. They just see this lack of ethics and morals and lack of kindness, in our society in general.
I'm going to ask each of you one last question, and then we're going to open it up for everyone, right? So, Reverend Walker, one virtue, if you could pass on one thing to a 9-year-old boy who's product of a single parent home, what would you pass on? You're muted.
I would pass on that to strive to do your best, to don't, well, to know that you have value, and to not let other people put you down, but to always have a positive attitude about who you are and what you can accomplish.
Okay. Strive to do your best, right? Persevere, be persistent. Mark S., what this 9-year-old boy, his name is John. What would you tell him?
If you got to pick one, I always come back to the golden rule, and it's become a part of me. Whatever you do, think when you're dealing with people, treat people the way you want to be treated. I think there's nothing more important, and it ties in with the kindness and the other things that we've been talking about. And I really believe everything flows from that.
Okay. Thank you, Mark S. Mark B., one thing, what would you tell John? One thing, if you could give him one key, what would you tell him?
I would tell him that the kindness road is the way to go. And while you're going down that road, be a leader, not a follower. You can be by yourself and still have make a fundamental difference. You know, a lot of people get grouped in and follow the leader, and to go out on your own and know what's right and to take that course, that's the best way to go, is just follow the, you know, your belief in what's right and act on it.
Okay, thank you. Be a leader, right? Be your own person.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Harry Campbell, what about you? One thing.
One thing I would say, think before you act.
Here we go.
Think before you act. I always think, but whatever come out of your mouth, once it's out, it can't come back. Yes. And also, Walter, what about you?
I would say wake up with a purpose. You know, there's something you want to accomplish, no matter how small it is. Wake up with a purpose, and also, and I remember being told by my elders in my family, do one good deed that day, whatever it is. Just do one good deed, whether it's speaking nice to someone, whether it's just doing something you wouldn't ordinarily do. Just good deed. So purpose and do a good deed.
Well, I want to thank all of you for this evening's engagement, and you know, we don't have these conversations in our community where men get together and we just talk, right? We go to sporting events, we have fun, we enjoy. But you know, we see the world is changing. Our young people are on their social platforms, so they're not hearing the messages about working hard, loving yourself, being kind. Be careful with your friends, right? Sometimes the mistakes you make, they last, they're lifelong, right? They don't go away. And so what we're saying is that we as a community of men and grandfathers, we have to be intentional. We have to engage our young people. We have to be present. And then we have to meet them where they are. And I know David is here, and what we're trying to do here in White Plains and Port Chester, Ossipee, we want to do in Poughkeepsie. We want to change that community so young people know that they can be better, that there is hope, that men care about them. So we want to open it up to everyone. David Green, you've heard a lot about this evening about wisdom, and you've given your life to serving others. Did the message this evening resonate with you? Is there anything resonated with you?
It all resonated with me. I believe wisdom is everything that everybody has said. But I also believe it's more about communication than the passing of knowledge and the passing of advice. You got to be able to be heard no matter how much you have to pass on. Nobody wants yakety yak, don't talk back. All right. We all want to make sure that we're heard. So it's more like being a good coach and a mentor rather than being a philosopher king and giving knowledge. Right. So it means to me, you're wise when you know you're a good confidant, when your greatest ability is the one to listen, and to help who you're giving this advice to come up with different and productive ways of seeing themselves and then dealing with whatever issues they may have. So simply put, I think it's giving critique with care and positive energy, as a student of mine once told me about positive energy. So after all, you know, I heard a lot of people saying what they were told by others. But you know, the only words of wisdom we remember, they only came from the ones we trusted and who we knew cared about us. So I think that's the most wisdom we have, is to be that person that's trusted and caring, so that the words we have are heard.
John Stewart, you just heard what David said. He's talking about, you know, trusting, being building relation. I mean, John, you guys go over to over to Church Street School every day, and I mean every other Friday, and you guys have built kind of a connection with these young people, and I believe that they expect to see you every other Friday, right?
Yeah, yeah, they're a lot of fun. Part of the thing that I would recommend is, just do it. I mean, sort of to say, repeat Nike, but it's like we have these opportunities, that we can do, and don't waste your time. Go and get involved with stuff. And I got to like congratulate my wife, because my mother's always thought that she was the most brilliant person on the planet, because she sent me off to culinary school and learned how to cook. And we have dinner at the table, and it's like, you can do this. You have the ability, and make it happen. And I think we have touched on things that are possible, but let's give it a shot. So,
Dean, you heard John say, "Just do it," right? Just do it, right? So you heard me mention about David up in Poughkeepsie, and you've been doing police work for years and years and years, and you've seen a lot of stuff, right? So talk about the message this evening, and what we're trying to bring to our community by being light in this dark world.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you and your panel. I've written down some of the notes here, and perhaps some of this wisdom will rub off on me. I'm still learning. Yeah, well, law enforcement gave me the opportunity to enter people's homes. And so offhand, I really got a chance to see how life is really played out. The mistakes, the common sense, the wisdom that people use in terms of relating to one another. I've sort of come to the conclusion that, wisdom is not something mystical. It's something that can be acquired. And I think it can be learned. Not in our school curriculum for some reason. It's mentioned in our religious, but somehow or the other, it's been taken away as being of value to human beings. In answer to your question in terms of how wisdom could be applied or applicable, I think all the gentlemen here mentioned different ways and different techniques. One thing comes to my mind, especially in the African American Caribbean culture, is our parents used to drop these sayings onto us, right? Lay down with the dog and get up with the fleas. And it was things like that that hit you as a kid, but it didn't really come to light until you became an adult. So I think that's one of the things that we can start doing. Sometimes you can't talk to kids directly. You have to hit them indirectly. And sometimes these wise sayings or something that is not something they've heard from common conversations with people, but it sticks. When my mother was passing away, I asked her to write down all these sayings that my grandmother, my grandfather said over the years. And like you had mentioned, they were not highly educated, but they did pass their wisdoms on to us through these different sayings. And I have a whole bunch of them. I'm using it to enlighten my grandchildren. So I think that's one of the ways to pass this wisdom on.
Jim, Dr. Eisenberg, you've heard the evening's conversation. Anything that stands out in terms of your mind? Jim is down in Florida, by the way. Jim, anything you want to add to this conversation this evening?
Oh, I appreciate the conversation. Makes me a little homesick for White Plains. So I must say the 70 degrees, is keeping the warmth in my heart, and we'll be heading back tomorrow. But I really appreciate the conversation among everyone, and it only underscores to me the great value of bringing everyone together and having a conversation. And one of the things that came to mind when I was listening, which I really appreciate the discussion about the whole idea of common sense. And that always was kind of a measure almost of who has common sense and what it means and what kind of decisions. I think not only for young people, I think, but for all of us. I think of people in my life who had common sense and learned and made good decisions. And the other, for me, one of the messages that really impacted my life when I first started junior high school, my older brother said to me, get to know everyone. Get to know everyone in the junior high school. You don't have to be best friends, but there are going to be lots of different people there, and just get to know them. Be open to knowing people. And it really, in my life, has had a real impact of just being open to people, different ideas, different experiences in life. And now, of course, it's been important meeting all of you grandpas and being open, how we continue to be open to learning and talking with each other. So I appreciate tonight's evening and glad that I could join.
I want to bring, thanks, Jim. I want to bring David. David is, we're trying to do this work in Poughkeepsie, and David is really trying to change the image of Poughkeepsie and what has come out in terms of the challenge there, and we talked about, so many young people are growing up in homes without wisdom, without a father or a male image, right? And what David is trying to do is to change that picture, change that narrative. So David, tell this community what's going on in Poughkeepsie and why this kind of program is so important.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank God for another opportunity to be in your midst. Frank, thank you for inviting me. I heard so many things. It took me back to my own childhood, really, and to start to think about some of the things that I had experienced, right? And I have 2 children here that I'm raising on my own, single dad. And I'm not a grandfather. I hope to be one day. But that will be said. The reason why, as an educator in the city of Poughkeepsie for 20-something years, 29, close to 30 years, it's prevalent because our young people have no one to look towards when it comes to giving them direction. And so I took on the task, through a friend of mine, Carmen, who reached out, and I just said to myself, it's time to get in the community to do some things because too many young people are going down the wrong road for no apparent reason other than they're not having the opportunity to choose better choices. Doesn't mean that they have to make the choices that they make, but they're not being provided with that guidance and that wisdom that you guys talked about. And then now, as you guys were talking, there's a lot of mitigating circumstances that cause the reactions that are going on. We have drugs and alcohol. We have social economic distraught poverty in the areas. And so what I've learned from children is that when I'm hungry and I haven't had a good night's sleep, I could really care less about what somebody wants to talk about. And until they see that there's someone that's interested in what they think and how they feel, it's almost difficult. And so I was sharing this. I formed a program called Protect the Dream Youth Program because I thought about one thing. Who's going to protect the dream of that child who has nobody to see their dream, right? And I thought that was just instrumental at my time in my, as I was moving through life. And so what I'm trying to do, and I'm getting some buy-in from everyone, is to like get in the community, start to meet the people, the young people where they are, and try to change the culture of what we have in our community. And that's my goal. And I'm trying, I promised myself that I'm going to stick in here because it's difficult. It's tough. You know, I have my own too. And I just want to be a difference maker, right? I don't want to be the guy to say I woulda, coulda, shoulda. I want to be the guy that's out there on the battlefield, on the front line, and dealing with these challenges. And it's one of the things that you guys said, I think Reverend Walker said it, that was so prevalent to me. As I was teaching, I was explaining those same things to children about what to expect if they did not make the right choices, or what the consequences would be. And the reward of all that is when they come back and say, thank you for you giving me that wisdom. And thank you for like giving me what you gave me, right? Because what you told me was true. And that's another reason why I do what I do, right? I like to be authentic. I want to learn the skills, the do's and the don'ts, because, you know, I can put my self-will on somebody, right? No, you should do this. But that's not really what it's all about. It's about allowing that individual to express what is going on with them and listening and hearing what they're saying, not just saying, well, you still know. And trying your best to understand. There's a thing that I picked up. It's better to understand than to be understood, right? I kind of picked that one up, and I kind of like that one. It's better for me to try to understand and then for me to be understood. And I think, man, I'm excited. You know, maybe I got to slow down. You know, I'm moving because I want to jump out the box. I want to get in the horse race, right? And I don't even have a saddle, right? But what I'm trying to say is, I want to do it right, right? Because I know if you don't do it right, it will succumb to failure. And I really need to take my time, allow Frank to guide me, allow you guys to guide me and show me what you know. So when we bring this program here, when everybody starts to buy in, that it can sustain itself, right? Yeah, so I'm thank you, Frank, again. Thank you guys, everybody. I truly appreciated you guys this evening. Man, I got so much information here. I'm going to have to sit back and kind of regurgitate it and kind of decipher what I had and put it down. But everybody had a valid point. But I want this to stick in everybody's mind, right? There are mitigating circumstances that has changed this whole country, right? Not from politics on down. And we have to try to look at that stuff when we're dealing with the situations that we're dealing with. Because if we bypass that and believe that we can fix it just by being grandpas and going in, then we're kind of almost fooling ourselves, because the challenges will still be there and they will still be facing us, and we must look at it. So that's to make use of the wisdom and the knowledge that you have to try to make the change. And I don't want to go on, but Frank, thank you again. Thank you. I will be back. I don't know how often you meet, but I'm just interested in the dialogue, and it gives me some more to take back to my men's ministry, try to get them on and try to get everybody involved in what you guys have started and the success that is taking place. So I believe that we will be successful if we continue to fight the fight.
Well,
thank you.
Well, I think we said it earlier, you know, it's to care, to be present. And I'm looking at Martin and Larry and Irvin and Dean. They've been involved with our youth court program. You know, people make mistakes, but when they do, we want to be there to let them know that they're human and they can do better. So I want to thank the men who have been involved with our youth court program. Our youth court program is really all of that and more. And we want to bring that to Poughkeepsie as well, David. So
yes, sir.
And we know that young people sometimes they make bad choices because they don't know better, right? Because, you know, if they don't have direction, what do they know? And so the men who are gathered this evening and the women recognize that it's so important to stand in the gap for our children. So it is basically 7:30. I want to thank all of our panelists. Give them a hand for speaking and for giving their time to this this evening's conversation. There's a lot of work to do, but I do know this: working together is easier than working alone, right? So thank you all. Thank you all so much, Diana. Thank you, Anu Rochelle. Thank you for being a part of this, Cassandra. Thank you all so much. You all be well, be safe. Jim, keep your eyes on the road now. Jim is
I
driving.
will.
Jim is
Great to see everyone. Thank you.
Jim, you're in Savannah, right?
No, we're leaving in the morning.
You're leaving.
And anyone who wants to fly down and drive the car back, happy to pick you up at the airport.
Hey, Jim, I'm flying down Thursday morning. The timing doesn't quite work, but
I
I'm
know,
sure
I
not
saw
coming
you.
back right away.
If
Yeah,
you
I
meet
saw
me,
you
if
were
you
going
meet
to
me in
Mexico,
St.
no?
Augustine on Wednesday, I may be able to help you out.
You're good. All right, take care, everybody.
Good night, guys. Hey,
Have a
Frank,
good
I'll
night.
be reaching out to you.
Thanks so much, Frank.
Frank,
Have a good night.
Take care, guys.
Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.
Take care.
Frank, thanks so
Mark,
much.
have
for
a
doing
good
this.
trip, Mark.
You got it. Thank you. I will. You'll hear
Talk to you
about
when
it.
you get back. I'll talk to you when you
All
get
right.
back.
You got
All
it.
right.